Hi guys, and welcome to today's session. So we're finally going to be putting some of the portrait feature based lessons that I've been doing recently into practice, starting with moving into a bit of painting and starting with what's going to be a monochromatic study. So we're going to roughly be working in a kind of brownish grey sort of look. We'll maybe be playing around a little bit with some chroma shifts, so saturation shifts, as the piece progresses. But today we're going to be just sticking with a burnt umber wash drawing. So basically I'm going to be using pure burnt umber, probably just a couple of brushes, maybe a smaller brush if I need it a little bit later, but I'm going to be mostly focusing on larger proportions. So we've already got the reference up next to us. And in terms of tools, I'm working on a gessoed panel, very roughly gessoed panel, because it's going to be a sketch essentially, this piece, and then just dipped this in some medium, but a slightly cleaned bristle brush, and then a softer brush. So this one's a bit more bristly, this one's a bit softer, and they're both kind of like a size 4, also size 3 or 4. But that depends on your surface. So kind of moderately sized brushes for this size piece. It's maybe 25 centimeters tall, something like that. Not huge. So it's a bit easier to photograph the smaller pieces. So I've got a bit of medium mixed into my burnt umber now. And if I go up here, you can kind of get a sense of how sort of washy the paint needs to be. So sort of like watercolory consistency. And we're going to go for major proportions to begin with. So we've got top of the head, which is going to be that kind of little triangle shape of his hair. But yeah, top of the head up here, and then we're going to drop down to where we want the chin to go, maybe about here for the chin. Side of the head popping out there a little bit, back corner of the head out here. And then we've got the sort of other side of the hair there. His hair up here. And then his sideburn, a little bit of his ear that's showing through. And you can see I'm being very rough and sort of sketchy with these lines. Got his neck, kind of drops down into his collar. So maybe, looking at this now, maybe we're going to lift the kind of bottom of the chin up a little bit. If we're kind of thinking about how that's going to connect across. So we use a sort of horizontal alignment. I can see the hair's going to kind of cut across roughly in line with where the ear is. That means the side of the face, it's got quite a blocky jaw, is going to kind of drop down that left hand side there. And yeah, it's looking not too bad. Using my other brush, a little bit of medium dipped in it, just to kind of start, pushing out anywhere that I need to. So you can use it, you can see I'm using it a little bit like an eraser. Really useful kind of aspect of working with burnt umber this way. Or creating wash drawings in general is you can sort of fiddle about with them as you're creating them, which is always really useful. So maybe I want to push this neckline down a little bit more. A little bit of his kind of costuming going. We don't have to do tons of that today. If we do develop that much in later lessons, we don't have to. These sorts of sketches, you know, you can be pretty loose with all the stuff that's not the primary focus. So now we can start filling in some shadows, some sort of darker tones here. So that's going to include things like his clothing. So this is a very roughly gessoed piece of wood. So when I say roughly gessoed, I mean I haven't really sanded it all. So you can go in and sand your panels. That's usually what I would do if I'm making more finished pieces. This just has literally just a coat of, you know, like acrylic gesso you get from the art shop, just over a piece of plywood that I had lying around. And it's a very good way to just kind of quickly build up a panel. I should probably make a video about it at some point, how you can kind of repurpose wood. So, got the sort of outside of his head in place roughly now. We're going to start going in for the features. So we're going to lay the eyes in, and you know, the last few videos I've been looking a lot at individual features, but we're going to look at how you can kind of start initially blocking them in. So we've got the brow. So if you remember watching the eye video, we kind of looked at the relationship between the brow and the eyes. This is going to be the line of the center of the eyes, so like the pupil and the iris. Going to make a little bit of a kind of note for where the center of the head is going to run down, because that's going to divide up the eyes. Then the nose is going to sit a little bit higher than that ear. And the other thing I can look for with the nose is like how much closer is it to the brow than it is to the mouth. And it's a bit closer to the brow than it is to the mouth. Sorry, to the chin. Then same again for the mouth. So the mouth sits a little bit closer to the nose than it does to the chin. But now I've got most of his features kind of, you see you're starting to get a sense of his features. So if we go back to kind of thinking about shadow shapes now, I'm going to do the other side of his face, which is mostly in shadow. And then the other side, the other eye, which isn't mostly in shadow, that's actually going to mostly be in light. We're going to do a very simple little kind of suggestion of the features of his eyes. It's starting to get a little bit of character there, that kind of slightly grumpy look that he's got. But yeah, that's not too bad as a kind of general suggestion of his eyes. His forehead's in a lot more sort of light, which is what I'm going for there. And now I can take a little bit more thick burnt umber and just start to lay that in a bit more richly. You know, anywhere it's going to go darker. And we're going for a pretty sort of pretty blocky look with this pass over. So I'm gonna refine it a lot more because we're gonna be building tones up. But for now, I'm trying to kind of maintain a sense of looseness and washiness. So starting to get some of those darker notes now into the face. So like, center of his mouth is going to be a little bit darker. And you see I've done most of this with this quite chunky brush. You might struggle a bit kind of taking that approach. But try as much as possible to start a painting like this using a pretty big brush. And it'll be hard, but you'll learn a lot from approaching it that way. It would hopefully open up your repertoire, so the types of brush strokes that you make, because you'll tend to find if you're just using a smaller brush or sort of softer brushes that are easier to control, you'll probably fall back into using less bold strokes, and often maybe more accurate strokes, but maybe lacking in a little bit of character. So I want to try to maintain character as much as possible. That was a little bit of a mistake I made there. I wasn't too bad with that, so I'm just gonna... Initially I rubbed it out, and the rubbing out didn't work much better than the original stroke, so just went back in with that stroke. So his clothing as well is going to be darker. Not all his clothing, but just the darker parts of his clothing. Generally it's the suit and the parts of the bow tie here. I'll try to give that a little bit of a shinier feel. So it's part of it's quite dark, part of it's lighter. Sometimes when I do kind of wash drawing examples, we literally just do one pass over the wash drawing. There's no like going back over with white or blocking tones. But in this case, I'm going to be doing quite a few passes. So different things we're going to be adding at different times. I'm going to take a bit more medium. I want to make my brush strokes a little bit more kind of thick. That's better. Maybe get a little bit of tone over this collar on the right hand side. And now go in, maybe hold the brush a little bit closer up. You maybe noticed I was holding the brush quite far back. You probably couldn't see even see where my hand was, but it was right back at I was holding it kind of right back here, the base of the long handled brush, which also forces you to keep things pretty simple. But I'm moving in, I'm going to try to add some slightly more precise stuff here and there. Get this eyebrow a little bit darker, get that underside of his brow. A little note in for his top of his eyelid, a little bit for the underside of his bag under his eye there. Now, some people don't always put the irises in at the same time, or not so much early on in the piece, but I tend to like putting them on moderately early on just because I feel like they help anchor the whole face a lot of the time. So I like to kind of work to them. I think they're really important. But some people kind of have this sense that they're almost too distracting. So it's like if you put them in, they make the face work too quickly, which I don't know if that's necessarily true. It was something I sort of adhered to early on, but not something I necessarily agree with now. So I tend to put them in quite early, long story short. So I'm just using my wiping brush to go back and just kind of unify, simplify some of these shadows. So yeah, that's not looking too bad, I think, for a sort of point to stop, because we're going to be reworking over the top of this next week using a bit of white. So if we need to change, there's a few things we're going to have to change in the shapes in the face. But it's generally best not to kind of overdo it, I think, this stage. If you were kind of carrying on, you maybe could keep tweaking, but this is often a good point to kind of leave it, this kind of level of sketchiness. Let that settle in and kind of come back to it when this is dry. And I'm going to be working it next week because that's when the next lesson is going to be. But, you know, I could go back into this probably within even 2 days at this time of year. So yeah, that looks like a pretty good point to stop, I think. And yeah, we'll be getting back to this in the next session. So as always, you can subscribe to the channel to keep up to date with courses from me and other tutors and other sorts of videos from the school. And if you want to see the sorts of paid qualifications we offer, you can click the link through to our website and see what's there. So yeah, thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you soon.